pretty accurate.
Welcome everybody to the Monday, July 26, 2021 regular school board meeting. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant,
Here.
Mr. Carpenter,
Present.
Mr. Guido,
Here.
Mr. Leeds,
Here.
and Mrs. Stone.
Here.
Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1.3, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No.
Thank you. Item 1.4, approve the agenda. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs.
Second.
Stone. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Section 2, discussion and comment from the board. Mr. Leeds, item 2.1.
The only thing I have is there is a lot of talk in Columbus about the voucher and charter schools, what they got in the budget. And it is staggering what they got. So there's people are saying within the next 2 years, when the budget comes up again, we have got one big fight for the school district to get any more money. But how vouchers got what they got, I don't know. It's unbelievable. So, but more to come on that. We're still intertwined up there, so to speak. So
Okay.
that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Guido, Butler Tech.
Just if you drove by the farm, you saw the work that's been started at the new building out there. The leveling is all done, and they're going to start concrete next, so that things are moving along speedily. And I think there was an article in the paper about,
It's a good word, speedily.
speedily. I think there was an article in the paper about the aviation program. We've been in process of expanding the aviation program. Currently have an avionics program at Hook Field in Middletown. Looking at expanding that there, as well as, I know, right, as expanding somewhere in Hamilton, to be determined. I can't release that yet, but things are going well there. So getting ready to begin the next school year, believe it or not.
On the corner.
That's it.
Awesome. Thanks. 2.3, finance.
We did not have a finance meeting this evening, so nothing to report.
2.4, anyone from MEA? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Section 3, communications. Comments from the public. We have a few people, and I will just read this before I call you guys up. The Board of Education recognizes the value to school governance of the public comment and educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. The public may participate during comments from the public or when recognized by the board president or superintendent. Those wishing to address the board must fill out request forms provided at the meetings. This should be submitted to the treasurer before the meeting begins. Persons addressing the board must give his or her name and address, and there will be a 3-minute limit for addressing the board. Such requests shall be subject to the approval of the superintendent and the board president. In order to permit the fair and orderly expression of such comment, the board shall provide a period for public participation at every regular meeting of the board and publish rules to govern such participation in board meetings. The presiding officer of each board meeting at which public participation is permitted shall administer the rules of the board for its conduct. Upon request of the superintendent, the district shall make reasonable accommodations for a disabled person to be able to participate in this activity. Executive sessions may be proposed at any time during the meeting by any board member for any purposes authorized by law. And per policy 0166, public complaints about district personnel may be heard in executive session. Okay, with that said, Danielle Johnson.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I've been a resident.
Can you state your address?
I'm sorry. Yes, it's 203 Scarlet Oak Drive, Monroe, Ohio. I've been a resident of Monroe for the last 16 years. I'm a mom of 2 kids who have grown up in Monroe local schools. We became a Hornet family when my oldest started kindergarten. She graduated in 2020 at the start of the pandemic. My youngest is now 14 and an incoming freshman. Both of my children also have underlying medical conditions which put them at higher risk if they would contract COVID-19. For this reason, my son, who has multiple risk factors, spent his entire 8th grade year in virtual learning. With the approval of the COVID vaccine, it gave us hope that the goal of reaching herd immunity this summer would be achieved and life as we knew it pre-pandemic would be able to resume safely for everyone. Unfortunately, we aren't there yet. It's been estimated that the herd immunity threshold is somewhere between 70 and 80%. As of today in Butler County, 43.26% of the total population has completed their COVID vaccine. For kids 0 to 19, only 12.23% have been fully vaccinated. And as you're all aware, children under the age of 12 are unable to be vaccinated for COVID-19 at all at this time. Needless to say, we've not hit the goal. The CDC currently recommends masks should be worn by students and staff who are not fully vaccinated. Last week, the American Academy of Pediatrics released a recommendation that all students wear facial coverings regardless of vaccination status. And today, the Ohio Department of Health released their guidance, which included a, quote, strong recommendation that masks should be worn by all unvaccinated individuals in schools. Representatives from Cincinnati Children's were part of the ODH press conference and voiced their agreement with this recommendation. All of this information leads me to my question. Does our district intend to follow these recommendations? As a mother who wishes to protect not only my own medically compromised child, but all others who are at risk, I'm here to ask, do we have a plan? I'm not sure if you're aware, but the deadline to enroll in the district's virtual learning academy is this Friday. That's 4 days. And we as parents do not know this information. In order for our family and others like us to decide if we can safely return to in-person learning, we need to know what precautions will be taken. I realize this is an extremely difficult decision for you to make, but please understand it's also extremely difficult for parents like me to make such a vital decision without all the necessary facts. Monroe families deserve a chance to make an informed decision regarding the school year. What are your plans to protect our kids, especially those who are medically compromised and or cannot be vaccinated? I urge you to please communicate the plan this week prior to the deadline for VLA enrollment. And if that is not possible, to extend the enrollment until a plan is announced. Help us make the best decision that we can for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Katie Wagner. Is it Wagner?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Katie Wagner, 217 Old Street.
Thank you.
How are you this evening?
Good.
Good? All right. So my name is Katie, and I'm grateful to be standing here on school grounds once again, and my family is eagerly awaiting the upcoming school year. As I reflect upon the education my children have received from Monroe local schools, I can't help but think of the lessons they've learned that have both challenged their minds and ignited their imaginations. Lessons in art, math, reading, and science. Science. This is an educational institution that teaches science. And as I'm certain you are all aware, the science regarding preventing the spread of COVID-19 is pointing towards vaccines and mask wearing. As a mother of children under the age of 12, my children are not eligible for vaccines at this time, nor are any of the other children in the elementary and primary classrooms. This poses a dilemma for concerned parents and a risk of illness for our children. Today, the Ohio Department of Health, in addition to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC, has strongly recommended that we follow the science that urges students to wear masks as a preventative measure against the spread of COVID-19. As the mother of children that currently have no choice in their vaccination status, I implore you to follow these strong recommendations from healthcare professionals and continue the mask wearing policies you carried out so well last year. I also urge you to consider extending the Virtual Learning Academy deadline until the school's reopening plan has been released, so both parents and students can fully make informed decisions regarding their education. I understand that this is a challenging decision for you all, and I understand that you are not able to please everyone. But while you might not have the power to please everyone, you do have the power to protect them. Thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. Pauline Pierce.
Hello. I didn't prepare a statement. That was everything I wanted to say. But I do want to add a couple of things.
Could you just state your
Yes.
address for the record?
45 Old Orchard Lane.
Thank
I've been a Monroe resident, well, I've been a student. I've been in Monroe my whole life. So, and my kids are also Hornets as well. And I am fortunate enough to have a child that's going to be a freshman this year that was able to get vaccinated, that doesn't have underlying health conditions that we know about. But I'm here because as a parent in the school district, the thought of one child getting anything seriously complicated from COVID when it could be prevented by simply wearing one of these, like you guys had last year, that would just be the most heartbreaking thing I could ever imagine, as well as losing any child to something that is preventable. So I urge you to follow the CDC guidelines as well as the strongly recommended guidelines, and to please take into consideration how you would feel if that happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbie Koss.
Hi. I also didn't prepare anything, but I'm here because I need to say that I tried. I have 3 kids. My oldest 2, I was able to make the choice as a parent to vaccinate them. My youngest is under 12. I can't make that choice yet to protect him with a vaccine.
Hey Barbie, can you state your address real quick, please?
We're also
I don't mean to
getting
cut
do
you
that.
off or
It's
anything.
okay. 2 Stone Ridge Lane. I kept them home at the beginning of last year because, like, they're talking about the deadline. We had to make the choice before masks were mandatory. So I said, okay, I'm keeping them home. It was a disaster. My youngest is on an IEP. He needs to be here. This is where he learns. This is where his teachers help him. Sorry. Okay. And I can't keep him home. It's a disservice to his education, but I don't want to send him here and have it be a disservice to his health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your comments. We really do appreciate that. We did get something later this evening or later this afternoon from BASA, and I'm just gonna share with you one little paragraph. BASA leadership attended a video conference meeting led by Dr. Bruce Vanderhoff, Chief Medical Officer of the Ohio Department of Health. Dr. Vanderhoff was joined by Dr. Patty Manning Courtney of Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Dr. Shafali Mahesh of Akron Children's Hospital. And they are basically saying that the updated guidance for school districts should be posted tomorrow. All right. And talking with Superintendent Butzkirk, you are in the talks of extending the deadline, and that communication will be going out to the parents. Okay, so thank you for your comments. We do appreciate you taking the time to come out and let us know. Okay. Hold on, I flipped one too many pages. There we go. 4.
Somewhere we are.
Section 4, Treasurer's Business. Item 4.1, approval of the minutes.
First, I'd like to ask the board to approve the minutes from the meeting on June 28th, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Sorry, Tom.
Mrs. K. Hall, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.2,
I'm asking the board to approve the treasurer's financial report for June 30th, 2021.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
I'd like to report that our cash balance on June 30th in the general fund was $26.4 million at the beginning of the year and ended with $29.4 million at the end of the year. Our receipts, it's because our receipts exceeded our expenses by close to $3 million. So in all the funds, which include the bond retirement fund and the permanent improvement fund, we have $37 million at the end of June 30th. At the end of the year. In June, as I've mentioned, all along we received subsidies from CARES. We've received additional money from a variety of sources. We've spent less in purchase services than we expected. So all of this has come about so that our revenue has exceeded our expenses by the end of the year. In June, we received $260,000 of additional revenue from the city of Monroe, and this could not have been anticipated. It was just quite a surprise, and altogether for the year in June, anyway, so all these things happened to make our revenue more than we expected and our expenses less than we expected. But I will say also in June, not only did we get additional revenue, we paid out $360,000 additional salaries and personal day and sick day bonuses, and also year-long supplementals. So it's always hard to project in June because of those things that are paid out, and you just don't know exactly what to expect. But so if you, can you go to the okay, so can you move it down a little bit? I just wanted to point out a couple things on a couple graphs. Okay, so every year we're looking at the fact that this is our revenue, this is our expenses, and we were getting close. We were getting close. Very beginning of last year. Yes, we were. We had a boost in our revenue. We were still going up, but maybe not as much as we were before. So we avoided getting more than 10%. So that was a good thing. And we're still projecting for next year that the state funding, and I think we're going to be successful next year. But we will see those numbers together, and I think I shared with you that we will know those numbers in October, and you can see what you see in the paper. But that's not what I'm going to put on any projections. So we really won't have that number until October. And then if you go down a little bit more, what I want to say was, okay, here's our history of expenses in 17. And so this is salary, this is benefit. About 42% of this is also salary and benefits, since we contract out for procurement and Dexo. Those are the people under the vice president. So it's mostly people. And so our salaries and benefits is right there. So most of the things that you're proving, we improve other things like our life, whether that's all right up here. But in comparison to salaries and benefits, it's pretty small. That's a lot more anyway. It's a little distorted for us, and I've noticed that when I first came here, but we still have salaries and benefits. So, but anyway, we can be happy about that, I think. And I said before, to go back down, so a lot of there. I mean, they're good. But you can see how our local revenue compares to our state foundation revenue, and we're going to expect to see this jump up. And I don't see how property tax revenue is not in that year too. Yeah, foundation is so flat. So I mean, okay. And like I say, the Fair School funding plan was just implemented for 2 years. So it means that politics will play a role in 2 years.
Not
but
no, not politics.
No.
No, not politics.
Not that capping a district is
But
political.
our
but
legislators did listen to us.
They have listened, that's true.
Yeah, they did. And they were calling, remember they were calling us early in the morning, telling us they were on board. So I think, hopefully they'll stay that way. So, okay, that's all I have for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.3.
I'm asking the board to approve the bond fund report. And in June, we received revenue of $29,513 in TIF and RID tax allocation. And we paid $134,000 in interest in school building bonds, but the current balance in the bond fund is $3,658,215. And one thing Brett had asked me last time, he said, well, how much do we have left in that debt? So the original loan was $29.9 million. And the principal amount owed on this debt is still $18 million. So we're in the middle of that. And the interest owed is $3.19 million. So it's mostly principal that's still owed. And I think that's because of all the refunding we've done. And the last debt payment will be June 30th, 2030. But we'll see what the next mills is. I mean, that loan or that debt is going to go down. I mean, those mills are going to go down because our values have gone up so much. So maybe, that'll help everyone. And
Holly, isn't there some accelerated payments due on that at the end? Isn't there some accelerated payments?
oh yes, there's some accelerated payments. So what's hopeful is that we'll collect enough and then at some point not have to charge it. The mills might drop off, and we've collected enough to continue paying that. That's, I think, at least maybe the next 2 years will still be taxed, but maybe towards the end we'll collect enough that we can just, we'll be safe, smooth sailing for 85 years.
May I
Thank
have a
you.
motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Mr. Guido?
Everything where it's supposed to be?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
We'll explain that joke later.
Any other
Gotta-
not really a
we gotta
joke.
tell them, well, the old record joke.
All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.4.
And asking the board to approve the certificate of total amount from all sources available for expenditure and balances for fiscal year 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Leeds. Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions?
And what this is, I just want to say, is we estimate what our revenue will be for the next year, and combined with the beginning balance in those funds. We filed that with the Butler County Auditor and the Budget Commission there, and then they approve it and approve that we do have enough resources. It's in the report to communicate that we will be using our resources to, how we'll be using them, but also how much we'll be receiving, and they approve that. And it's a very important thing for the auditors as well.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.5.
I'm asking the board to approve the second amended certificate of estimated resources for fiscal year 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
Holly has discussed, I called you this morning on this. Have you found anything on the football camp for $67,000?
Okay, yes. So I looked at that again. The amended certificate had that we ended the year with $36,000. And I expected them to receive 30,000 this coming year, and it's based on this past year and the year before.
Can you click on the attachment?
Does it have that if we click on that?
I was, sorry.
Oh,
I
okay,
was
that's
like-
okay.
So we can kind of see it.
Scroll down.
Yeah.
Well, first, oh, it's, yes, it's right here. Let me do that. Oh, here it is, football camp, and it could be football fundraiser. I mean, they start out with a camp, they continue adding fundraisers. So it ended the year with $36,709, and I'm projecting fundraising $30,000. And it does look kind of strange. I think, I agree with him. So, for this fund, okay, so with this fund, they have two major fundraisers. One is the football cards and one is the mulch. So we don't wear the community out with fundraisers. But, so they have two fundraisers. And then the number of students growing in these fundraisers, well, they've grown. I mean, we've had more and more students participating in it and building this up. And so they collect the money and then they use the funds for mostly spirit wear and team uniforms. They, this year, they want to purchase headsets for some of the coaches. But most of all, looking back, they have food, and a lot of it's for the kids and also to help offset costs so the parents don't have to buy these things. So that's, when I looked at it, they purchased decals for their helmets, all that.
That is if I'm not mistaken, that is the fund that, that replaced the touchdown club when I shut down the touchdown club.
That's what Eric told me,
Okay.
really it was.
Okay, and that's the money that we would raise, those were all the things that we would raise money for through those two fundraisers to offset what the boosters had to pay. So it would, those extra monies that the boosters had could go to all the other sports, and we raise money specifically for football.
That's right, exactly. So we ended the year with 36,000 in the account. But a lot of it, April, May, and June was the mulch sale, and that was like $16,000 that they collected for that. So they really haven't started to spend that, although they did have spent $5,000 already, and that was for the headsets, and they have a $7,000 purchase order open. So they're already starting to spend it. But I want to share too. When I looked at history, this is just all revenue. So how do they spend it, and why do they get this big balance? So this kind of gives you a little bit of history. And one thing in 2020, there was so much going on, quarantining and not knowing. They did receive 32,000, so they did have some fundraising, but they really weren't spending even though with quarantine, the spring, things were starting to ramp up. But anyway, I just think that kind of threw them off a little bit. But it shows you how, even after 2020, things were kind of crazy, but they started with 7,000 at the beginning in 2020, and they received 32,000. They spent 17,000. So, and then they had a balance in 22. And then it went from there. But I think this last year, they earned a lot after the first half of the year, and it's still sitting there, and now they're starting to spend that. So they have plans for it, and I think they were surprised at how much they collected from some of these sales, with the increase in number of students doing it. So,
Well, it makes sense. I mean, in 2017, there were 38 kids on the football team. Now there's 80. So it's almost tripled in numbers.
It has.
So of course that number is going to go up substantially.
My biggest thing is you need to change this different than football camps. Football's something else. Because when I look at this thing, I'm thinking, when's the bus leaving and where we're going to go?
oh, I should change the name of it. It's just
One of the Super
football
Bowl, Tom.
fundraisers.
It's a
It's
state
Campus one of the
championship.
fundraisers. Yeah, that's what you think.
State championship, and then the Super Bowl.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Up at the top in the gray, the second to the right, it says other. If we follow it all the way down to MHS athletics,
At the bottom there.
at the very bottom, it says other, 128,943. What's the other signify?
Okay, it's everything non-tax. And no, because if you notice, there's only, this column here, that's tax receipt, and this is other.
Okay, so that's receipts.
Yes, these are all receipts, beginning balance, I think, that I didn't write down.
Yeah, can you, just for a second, can we see the top day of thing?
Unencumbered balance, this is like in your checking account.
Okay.
At the end of the year.
Okay.
And then this is how much of the receipt of taxes.
Okay, but
gotcha.
then,
General fund and then from improvement fund.
okay, so can you go back down to like the app? We were just like kind of in layman's terms, we picked that one to walk us through because we're kind of getting it, we kind of didn't. Go back to, like, you don't have to move anything, I'm sorry. The MHS athletics, so we start with the checkbook amount of 56,000. That would be a very nice checking account balance. I'd like to start with that, yeah. And then other, okay, taxes is 0. The next column says other, and there's 128,943. What is that? Like, if we were trying to understand or explain what that is.
Ticket sales, and I'm probably overestimating.
Okay, so that's like
That's the
estimates.
revenue.
That's what we're trying to get
And
at.
this is
Yeah.
what they have to
Yeah.
spend, so then they maybe spend 160.
Okay. So it's what you're starting with, what you're estimating gives you that number.
Okay,
Right.
all right,
Cool.
that makes sense.
Confirming with the Butler County auditor, this is how much we have to spend.
Okay,
And then the auditors say, oh, you should, then you.
But it's not like
the
money's
forecast.
earmarked from the general fund. It's cool, that helps,
okay,
thanks.
that was perfect.
Estimates, that's what we're saying, it's not general fund money.
Yeah. All right, thank you,
Okay,
Holly.
thank you very much.
Any other questions? Besides when the bus is leaving?
We got to tell them where we're going first.
I just did, state championship.
Mrs. Cahall, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.6.
I'm asking the board to approve a 5-year contract with Pitney Bowes for the postage meter.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions?
Less money, great job.
Yeah, good job, less money.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Bring back Coney Express.
All right, Ms. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone.
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 4.7.
Okay, I'm asking, the last is I'm asking if the board wishes to appoint a delegate and an alternate for the annual business meeting for the OSBA Capital Conference. And if you do, and I think I've shared that if you choose not to, that's fine, it's fine. I mean, we don't have to.
Okay. Do we have to take a motion first before we discuss?
Surely.
May I have a
So
motion,
moved.
please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr.
Sorry.
Guido.
No, and Mr. Carpenter, I
Thank you,
will
Mr. Carpenter.
allow the gentleman to have it.
I mean, I would
Very-
recommend our,
Mr. Carpenter, second. Mr. Guido is motion.
Okay, thank you.
So.
I would recommend our legislative guys do
Yes.
that.
And Tom, I believe you were the delegate
Last year.
Yeah.
last year, but that didn't happen.
Well, we had a virtual.
We had a virtual, and then you were the alternate.
Backup.
Do we want to keep that the same?
Fine with me, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'll go.
You good with that, Tom?
Yep,
You want to go?
I'll go.
Road trip.
Road trip.
That's where the bus is going.
They
Tom.
may,
That's the bus is
That's where
going.
the bus is going.
It's going to Columbus.
That makes sense.
It'll
Let's
be
take
a
a bus
short bus,
for one
but I'll go.
person.
All right, so I will, I have the paperwork in here. I can fill that out and have them sign it after the meeting.
Yeah.
So don't leave
Okay.
after the meeting.
Do not.
is this permission to get on the bus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Section 5, Superintendent's Personnel Business, the last one.
It is recommended that the board approve resignations from the following employees.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.2,
It is recommended that the board hire the following new employees.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? And no one's in attendance? Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, no.
You were just getting antsy on that pen, man.
I'm just-
Yeah. We were so
You're ready to
excited.
start.
Now just making sure. Any questions? All right, Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.3,
It is recommended the board approve the following long-term substitutes for the 2021-2022 school year.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.4,
Yes, it is recommended the board approve the following extracurricular contracts.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Glad to see Mr. Darrell coming back out of retirement to get back on the cross-country coaching scene. Good stuff. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.5,
It is recommended the board approve paying stipends per page 100 of the MEA agreement. It states, "A teacher who teaches an advanced placement or college credit plus course shall receive a $1,000 stipend annually. This is a total stipend regardless of the number of courses or sections taught."
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 5.6,
It is recommended the board approve the following teachers to receive stipends for teaching additional preparation periods per the MEA Master Agreement, Article 18.2.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Section 6, Superintendent's Other Business, item 6.1.
It is recommended that the board approve the following donations. Donation of $100 from A.J. Fulham for girls soccer, and donation of $100 to the Pee Wee football camp from Tom Maxwell.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
donation.
Thank you for the donations. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.2.
It is recommended the board approve the purchase of a new air conditioning unit for the field house.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
That was a good description. End of life AC
AC.
unit. There's no rehabbing it.
Well, as we were sitting out there for graduation, we were talking about how warm it was inside the building.
Yeah, well,
Makes
there
a lot
you
of
go.
sense
True,
now, doesn't
yeah.
it?
That would be the reason why.
We did notice that, yeah.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.3.
It is recommended the board approve the MOP and microfiber service agreement with Aramark.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
Can we ask what is that? Sorry, I'll ask it.
So Aramark,
In layman's terms?
yeah.
I got a question.
No, essentially they provide the product, the pickup, the delivery, the cleaning service for all of our microfiber type products in order for us to run our operations.
And the moms.
And this has been, this has been in place for
Interesting.
quite a long time, and we just went out for an RFP and they were the winning vendor, so.
Okay. Since it went out to an RFP, did the price stay about the same, or did it go down a little bit? Or did it go up?
It's about $74 a week. I think it was
About the same.
about the same.
About the same.
About the
Yeah.
same? Okay.
Yes.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Mrs. Kale, please call the roll. Tim and Tom.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Mr.
Sounds like a radio
Carpenter,
show.
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.4.
It is recommended the board approve the job description and pay rate per the MEA agreement 51.2 for alternate substitute teacher.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. And this is, as it says, will be paid by ESSER funds, correct?
Correct.
It's a 1 year.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Mrs. Kale, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.5.
It is recommended that the board approve the Ames Web Plus contract for FY 2022 at a cost of $6.50 for 1,454 students for a total cost of $9,451. Ames Web Plus is a benchmark assessment system and a progress monitoring tool used for grades K through 6 for math and reading.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. This Ames Web, we've been using this. This is just a new renewal contract?
Right.
All right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's yearly?
Yeah.
We've used it for
Yes.
10, 15 years.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to, I'm getting older, so I just want to make
We
sure.
have to
I'm-
remind you.
Everything's still going. I turned 50 in a week and a half.
And when
Oh, is that-
Andrea did her presentation and she
Yes.
talked about a lot of the tech tools,
Yes.
those
The
are
way it
things
was a
we're
while ago.
approving tonight. Yeah.
That are in here. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, Mrs. Kale, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.6.
It is recommended that the board approve the contract for the iReady digital tool for the junior high and high school for FY 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
Why was I see the comment here, but why was the junior high so much more? Like, how do they use them differently, I guess?
So the,
Put you in the spot.
yeah, that's all right. I'll embrace the spot on this, Mr. Carpenter. The junior high has specific pathways for the students to which it's tailored to meet their individual readiness needs. And I believe the high school cost is slightly different because they are just looking for the benchmark assessment tool alone, to where the junior high package is really built for the entire school year to really kind of close those gaps from the beginning of the year to the close, where the high school is just looking for those 3 data points throughout the year, and they're getting on. Okay.
Yeah, really the only difference is in Ames Web and in this, iReady gives instructional tools and things for the teachers to use. Ames Web and what the high school is going to use is not. It just does the assessment and the correspondence.
Okay. Yeah, I remember Hazel having a bunch of iReady stuff in junior high. So
Yeah, the kids love me for that.
yeah, she really thought it was enjoyable.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll embrace it.
Thank you for the explanation.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.7.
It is recommended that the board approve the contract with Butler County ESC for one-to-one nursing services for a student for FY 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.8.
It is recommended that the board approve the contract with Butler County ESC for substitute nurses for FY 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.9.
It is recommended the board approve the employee handbook as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.10.
It is recommended the board approve the athletic and marching band handbooks as presented.
May I have a motion?
So
Aye.
moved.
Second.
He's making a motion and voting at the same time.
He's efficient.
It is summer.
Any questions? That was Leslie, and Mr. Guido was the second.
Okay.
And he voted.
I get excited with the marching band, guys.
He does. He's very,
Yes,
that's true.
passionate.
That's true.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. And that's it for the superintendent's business?
You guys leave me alone.
I'm going to change it up a little bit. I know before we adjourn, we have board comments. I'm going to start, if you don't mind. So, Kathy, I know this is your last school board meeting. You're off to a new venture. So, as the board president, I've worked with you the last 2 years pretty close, hand in hand during the pandemic and everything. So, you probably are glad that you're moving. I'm just kidding. But anyway, on a serious note, it's been a pleasure working with you. You're going to be deeply missed in the district. Once a Hornet, always a Hornet, as you know. And I want to thank you for everything that you've done for the district in the 4 years that you were here. So on behalf of the board and the district, we got you a little gift. So I'll hand that to you. But before I do, I would like the other board members to be able to have a chance to speak. All right. Mr. Leeds?
Yeah, Mr. Grant, I agree with you 100%. And Kathy, you've done a yeoman's job. You have led your staff through the difficulties of COVID, and you led them and never looked back. And you did a great job for this district, and I'm sure that you're going to do a great job in Columbus. And all I can say is we appreciate everything you've done, and you have boosted this district up from what it was when you came. And don't be a stranger to get back in this area and stop in and see us.
Never. I will never be a stranger.
Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you. Mr. Gatto?
I would just say you brought, consistency and professionalism to the district and a lot of structure, which was greatly appreciated by many, and certainly me as a board member. It was fun negotiating with you over the phone when I was in Washington, D.C. and bringing you on board as she looks away. It was worth every minute of it, and very proud to have met you and worked with you in this capacity, and wish you the best of luck.
Yeah. I know when we were interviewing you and talking about Monroe, we kept describing it as a special place. And then I remember, fast forward, you're in the thick of everything. And even when there were some not so fun conversations, you would have to call, I guess when it was my turn, just heavy topics or whatever. And I'm like, you were always very professional, and I'd just be like, is there anything we can do for you? Do you need anything? Are you doing okay? And you're like, still a great day in Monroe. I love my job. And so I think that right there is probably the greatest lesson that I'll remember, is that no matter what was going on, you were very optimistic, and just kind of that was contagious. So once a hornet, always a hornet. That is very true, but you really made a difference, and we're really thankful you were here. So, but you're not a stranger, so stay in touch. So, and hey, I didn't cry, so I'm good. Okay, you didn't cry.
I guess I'll cry.
Yeah.
There's still time.
There's
Yeah.
still time.
For me, like one of the big things is when we were meeting with you for the first time, and we were doing our interviews in that second round. One of the big things that we kept emphasizing was how we want education to be at the forefront of what we do. And it was really your leadership with the strategic plan, bringing that here is what really helped us get that going so well. And, you know, I really appreciate that because I have kids here, so thank you.
And I believe you laid the groundwork for Robert to step in and take it to the next level as well. So we're just going to keep going building blocks. And also, I wanted to say thank you for the smooth transition with Robert. That was very much appreciated. So with that being said, we do have a little gift, and we do want to get one final picture.
And then we wanted to know what your
I know.
What's your name? Tim, I'll stand in front of you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm big enough. I can
So
walk
we'll
in.
meet you up here.
I'm always blocking.
I hope she appreciates that.
Picture of us. It's a picture of us. Right in the center. Oh, yeah. Okay, ready? Then we're gonna song and dance, right? Oh, apparently not.
I thought of one other thing just to put on the radar, because you haven't taken the motion yet, have you? I'm sorry. Okay. Because I know we have a couple candidates in the audience that are running for school board as well as a rerunning one. I know that the offer 12 years ago, now 13, when Mr. Guido and I ran, anybody that's elected that's new to the board, we really were encouraged to go to OSBA in November. So I assume that that offer is kind of an ongoing, so they can, whoever's elected, whatever, kind of putting that out there because we won't be going this year, so.
Nice to see other people step up.
Yes, yes.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to get that on the radar.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. Good point. With that being said, thank you again, Kathy. And may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:23?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. All right, Mrs. Kale, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's board meeting, and see you in a month.